Grandmother-grandchild relationships are simple. Grandmas are short on criticism and long on love. Author unknown. That was the kind of relationship I had with my grandmother, Grace Johansson Cole. This woman had a profound effect on my life with her stories of her experiences, both heartache and positive. She taught me that family is the most important thing and to always show affection and tell someone you love them because you never know when they're not going to be around anymore. Most people my age who grew up in Alaska remember the beyond frigid cold winters and the not too much warmer summers. We had gas and electric to help combat those elements. But can you imagine having those same elements back in the early 1900s where gas and electric didn't exist yet? My grandmother grew up during those times. Grace Johansson Cole was born February 24th, 1916 in the village of Kenai, Alaska, to Fred and Mary Johansson. She was the second eldest child and the oldest daughter. The only transportation during that time in Kenai was boat in the summer or dog sled in the winter. Grandma had her own dog sled team all the years of her growing up. She attended the Kenai Territorial School and spent most of her younger years helping with the family fish site, fox farming, or helping raise 13 other siblings. My great-grandmother was a very busy woman. She endured the heartache of several of her brothers and sisters dying from accidents or disease as if those were her own. Grace married young and had 2 sons. The man she married was abusive, so she divorced him and chose to raise her sons as a single parent. In order to provide a better life for her sons, she left them with her mother and moved to Anchorage to find work. She would put in long hours as a waitress, lifting massive dinner platters with both arms, steak juice dripping on them, and burning her skin. On Friday nights, the only source of entertainment they had in Anchorage was the local dance hall, where she would go and dance the night away with the GIs that were stationed in Anchorage during the war. One story she told me that was fascinating was she was returning from a trip to Seattle by ship, and they had to cover all the windows with dark tarps so that they could sneak by the Japanese submarines that were lurking in the water outside of Alaska. She spent the entire trip praying that she would make it to Seward safely. Here this young woman was only in her mid-20s and had already faced so much heartache from the death of her siblings, an abusive husband, and raising 2 young boys alone. But she never became bitter or resentful. She stayed the course and was faithful that her life would continue to get better. In 1946, she met my grandfather, Malcolm Cole. They married that year, and my mother was born in 1947. Grandma and Grandpa built their house on the outskirts of Kenai where they raised my mom. My 2 uncles from her first marriage were grown and in the service by this time. When my mom was 13, the family had another heartache set in. My great uncle Andy and my grandmother's brother and her own son Neil drowned in a boating accident. Once again, my grandma had to muster the strength to keep on for her daughter and her husband. When my mom married and had me, my grandma and I formed a bond that was strong until the day she died. It would be nothing for me to spend the weekend at her house, sometimes a week or more at a time. We only lived a short distance from my grandparents, so it wasn't like we were out of state, but I really loved to be with my grandparents. One Christmas I'd been at their house for over a week. My mom finally called on Christmas Eve and said, "Are you coming home for Christmas?" I didn't even think twice about it because, as far as I was concerned, that was my second home. I remember being just a little girl going out to the fish site with Grandma and helping her cook for the fish crew and playing for hours on the beach. We'd visit her friends and relatives, even taking a steam bath in the banya that was over in Old Town Kenai. We'd go berry picking and make juice or jelly. We'd help my grandpa smoke fish or process moose that he had hunted. My grandma's house was my second home. Even when I was a teenager, I would still spend time with my grandparents, though my boyfriend, my job, and my car were also important. My grandma would tell me stories of the old days and teach me Russian words. She loved to reminisce about growing up in Kenai, what her brothers and sisters were like, and her parents. I never knew my great-grandmother. She died before I was born. When I got married and had my children, she was right there at the birth of both babies. She cried tears of sorrow when we had some complications with my daughter's delivery. We were very worried she was in the hospital, and my grandma was there with me the whole time, with my mom, my dad, and my whole family. And then when my son was born, he was a normal delivery, and we had great tears of joy at that event. Grandma began having health issues with her heart when I was a teenager. I noticed how tired she was really getting after she had a stroke while she was driving her car and had a head-on car collision. She told me that she'd actually made it to the gates of heaven, and my grandfather and my great-grandmother had turned her away, saying that it wasn't her time yet. She was so mad. She was ready to go home to be with them. She came back to us and lived another 5 years. She lost her driver's license due to the accident and kept insisting the rest of the years that she lived that she was going to get that license back. She was a fiercely independent woman, and not being able to come and go as she pleased really did not sit well with her. Rather than argue, I just told her, if you can get the doctors to sign off on it, then we'll go get it. She never did get that license back. Grace finally got to go home to be with her husband and her mother on July 8th, 2000. As I was preparing this speech, I had a chance to reflect on all the things that my grandmother taught me from the time I was little. She taught me how to persevere even when I think things are impossible. She taught me that family is everything and things always have a way of working themselves out. She had her opinions about things, but usually waited until I asked her for it, and she was someone that I could always confide in. I chose to write this commemorative speech on my grandmother because she played a huge role in shaping me to be the woman, wife, mother, and grandmother that I am today. My grandmother's legacy lives on because my middle name is Grace, after her, and my granddaughter's name is McKinley Grace, after her as well.